Hey guys! So first of all, I'd like to quickly apologize for not posting in a while. I really wanted to, but I was quite busy with some real life issues. However, now that I'm getting back into creating these videos, I hope that I keep up the rhythm and I'll be posting more often. So today I'd like to discuss the changes that were made to the character of Boromir between the Lord of the Rings books and the films. So we first see Boromir when he arrives in Rivendell. Now there is a small change here between the books and the films, because in the film we see him riding in on horse, while in the books he had left on horse, but his horse died midway, and he actually had to journey the other 100 days left on foot. And Tolkien himself said that this was to show Boromir's fortitude, strength and willpower. Now there are three other changes that occur in Rivendell, and the first two occur in the Council of Elrond. So firstly, in the films when Boromir says they should take the ring to Minas Tirith instead of destroying it, the council disagrees with him and he seems to not agree with their opinion. You know, he shakes his head, he tells them it's crazy, it's folly. While in the books he does disagree with them, but then he accepts their decision because he does accept that they are wiser than him. Also in the films, when Boromir is introduced to Aragorn, he shows a certain level of disdain and disrespect towards Aragorn. When he's told that Aragorn is the king of Gondor, he tells him that Gondor has and needs no king. Now this is different from the books, because in the books he does express some doubt in Aragorn, but he never shows that level of disrespect or antagonism. His final change in Rivendell also again involves Aragorn, when Boromir is examining the shards of Narsil, and Aragorn's watching him, and Boromir basically cuts his hand on it and drops it on the ground while saying it's nothing but a broken blade. And this never occurs in the books. From this point on, nothing else is changed until we go to the mountains of Caradhras. Now in the films there's a scene when Frodo drops the ring in the snow, and Boromir basically picks it up and Aragorn demands that he gives it back to Frodo. And you have that slight face-off when Aragorn slowly reaches towards the sword. Now this, again, doesn't occur at all in the books, and instead something that is omitted from the films but is present in the books is that before going up on the mountain, Boromir suggests that they bring firewood with them, which actually manages to keep the Fellowship warm, and it's one of the main reasons why they survive the mountaintops. So now, throughout Moria, there aren't really any changes, and the next change we'll see is when the Fellowship reach Lorien. Now when it comes to Lorien and Galadriel, both the books and the films show that Boromir was fearful of them and he wanted to avoid going there at all costs. Also in the films, we see Galadriel talking to Boromir telepathically, where she tells him about the fall of Gondor and that there is still hope. While in the books, we don't know exactly what she told him, but he does appear shaken from it. So now after this, the next change we see is slightly before Amon Hen, when the Fellowship would be camping, and Boromir again suggests to Aragorn that they should take the ring to Gondor, or at least pass by that area. And he tells Aragorn that Aragorn lacks faith in his own people, the men of Gondor, and he has a fear of what he is, you know, that he is technically the king of Gondor and that Aragorn fears this. And Aragorn basically confronts him and tells him he wouldn't take the ring anywhere close to Gondor. And this scene is exclusive to the films because nothing like it happens in the books. So now at this point we reach what's probably one of Boromir's most iconic moments, when he tries to take the ring from Frodo. Now both the book and the film are true to this, he basically first asks for it, tries to reason with him, before trying to take it by force, in which causes Frodo to run off basically. But the change is how the Fellowship get to know, because in the film, after Frodo runs off, it basically cuts off to Aragorn, who starts fighting the Uruk-hai, while in the books, Boromir actually goes back to the Fellowship and he gives them a much nicer version of the story, that he and Frodo had a slight disagreement and Frodo walked away peacefully. There was no violence or attack. And the Fellowship, especially Aragorn, suspect there is more to this. And once they find out that Frodo is lost, they all split up suddenly, even though Aragorn asks them to stick together. And he tells Boromir to chase after Merry and Pippin, who went running off in a certain direction. So the next time we see Boromir is when he saves Merry and Pippin from the Uruk-hai, and he starts blowing the horn of Gondor, fighting them off, and he's eventually killed by 3 arrows from that head Uruk, Lurtz, as he's called. And again, this is different slightly from the books, because even though his manner of death is similar by arrows, there is no Uruk general, and his death is actually described from Pippin's point of view in the second book, that is never recounted, firsthand in the first book. So for the rest of the first film, they basically kept the last bit of his story true. There weren't many changes. However, I'll now talk about some of the changes that occurred in the second and third film, when Boromir appears in flashback, memories, etc. So in the second film, we see a flashback from Faramir, where we see him and Boromir basically winning back Osgiliath. And they're then visited by their father, who tells them that the One Ring has been found. It's called the Weapon of the Enemy, and it basically suggests that before Boromir went to Rivendell, they had already known it was the One Ring. Now this is different from the books, because in the books, their father doesn't know anything, and in fact they learn about this from Faramir, who has a dream, and it's actually called the Isildur's Bane. And they wouldn't know that it is the One Ring until Boromir reaches the Council of Elrond. So now I'd like to talk about some changes to Boromir's character in general between the books and the films. And one of the most important things I think that should be pointed out is that in the films, Boromir has a certain disdain towards Aragorn. He doesn't like the kings, he doesn't want them to come back, and there was this almost rivalry between them. But this was mainly added for drama. Despite this, in the books, there is a part where he expresses some disappointment that the stewards aren't kings of Gondor, because it said that one time he was with his father and brother, and he asked his father how come the stewards have yet to become kings, how many years must pass for them to actually just become the king. Another part I'd like to talk about is when he confronts Frodo and tries to take the ring, because in the films it's portrayed as a very selfish reason that he wanted the ring to save his country, while in the books his primary motive is not him getting the ring, but it's actually saving his country, because at first he actually suggests that Aragorn should have the ring, and if Aragorn doesn't want to, then he can try and save Gondor with it. And I think this reflects much better on him as a character, that he was ready to go very far to save his city, and it wasn't about self-glory. Despite all these changes, I think the way they portrayed Boromir in film was adequate. You have to have a certain amount of drama to make a film work. And despite these changes, they still managed to give him a very respectable and good death, and he was a super character. So I think they did manage to make it fit well, and I can't grumble. They also showed some of his more redeeming qualities in the film, in the extended editions of them. So if you haven't seen them, I highly recommend that you watch them, because they add a lot more depth to some characters. So that wraps it up. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and more so I hope you got something out of it. If you'd like to leave any feedback, comments, likes or anything of that sort, feel free. I enjoy reading them, and yeah, I enjoy seeing any questions and answering them. If anyone's new, feel free to subscribe. I'm gonna post more content as always, and thanks as always.